You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Well, happy Tuesday evening, folks. This is Scotty Roberts. Welcome to the program. This is, of course, the Intrepid radio program or broadcast or radio show, whatever you want to call it. We're technically not on radio right now because we're on a little bit of a hiatus from Odyssey Radio, but go check them out, odysy1.com. That is the parent network for this show, which will soon be airing back there again simultaneously with the live broadcast here on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And I want to welcome everybody to the show tonight. I got to look over to the chat room. James, good to see you. Master Finn. Now, he says weirdness is an understatement. Yeah, that's true for our topic tonight, the weirdness of Enoch. It's Enoch. The book of Enoch is like the Old Testament on crack. So we're going to get into some of that tonight. Roger Rabbit, good to see you as well. And Susie Q, glad to have you here as usual. Elder Barry, good to see you as well. And who have we got? We got Matthew Sainsbury, good to see you from way down in South America somewhere. And Teresa Dantone, nice to see you as well. Doug Stack over there wading through the 30-odd inches of rain that they got in 20 minutes down in almost just north of Lake Charles, Louisiana, where I was. And so Doug Stack, glad you could make it tonight, as waterlogged as your state is right now. And Ryan Gale, good to see you, brother. Awesome sauce. And that reminds me, because you were there with the regiment. You remember Johnny Knights, Ensign Johnny Knights? He once walked up while he was on sentry duty at our encampment. You know, we did a historical encampment, so he's on sentry duty, and he's got his musket over his shoulder and his red coat and his kilt and his sword and all of that. And he marches up to two ladies that were crossing into the boundary of our encampment. And he said, "Halt!" He says, "I want to know what you two saucy baggages are up to." So that's what reminded me of that. You were just talking to Handsome Johnny. I haven't talked to him for a long time. So we're just on different paths right now. So glad to see you here, Ryan. Carly Sagan, good to see you. Say hi to Kinsey for me. And that's all I see. Macabre, you over there in Japan. Sterling, good to see you, brother. And so welcome to the show, everybody. I'm glad you're here. And thank you for putting up with my day off last night. I was just, by the end of the day, I was sitting on the sofa and I was like, I ain't doing a radio show tonight. Only because I sat there and I could barely keep my eyes open. My head kept tipping and I hadn't put up an announcement for the show for last night. And emotionally, mentally, physically, I was just like all Dean out, as they say in the Scots language. So I'm glad that you're here tonight, however, though. Hopefully tonight we'll have double impact after missing last night. And so my wife, Rainey, had to step out to go help a neighbor with something across the street. And my children are all upstairs. And so I'm this is the way I babysit. But they're all in bed. You know, they have school tomorrow. It's after 9 p.m. here. And but I keep hearing yelling and screaming. And Rainey's usually up there while I'm doing the radio show, getting them all settled down. And so I told them in no uncertain terms, there will be no tomfoolery tonight, okay? And I think they're abiding. Yeah, Dad, we're good. And then I just heard somebody yelling just as I was doing the intro tonight, the intro music, and somebody started stomping or slamming a door. And I yelled up, "Knock it off! That'll be enough of that. That'll do, pigs. That'll do." And so it's been pretty quiet. It was a $40 doghouse macabre. Just wanted to let you know. Hey, for anybody who saw that post, it was kind of dumb. Rainey was kind of mad at me because, there's you put out so much money supporting him the 3 months you were down in Louisiana, and now he's here and he's got to find a place. He's got to find a job. He had the guys that wanted to bring him down to Texas, and that got delayed 2 or 3 weeks. And Rennie's like, not because she doesn't love Sam, but she's like, oh my God, having another full adult male human being living in our house right now when we're already busted at the seams. And and our house is just cluttered right now because Rainey's been going through everything for whenever we move toward the end of August. And so it's just been a clusterfuck around here. And she said, Sam has got to find a job up here or a place to live. And so he called his friend, his good buddy. They were buddies since they were in 4th and 5th grade. And they're still friends. And so he's going to live at his place. He was excited about that. And then he finds out his grandpa has a temporary job for him in construction. He says, you want to come and work for me and do some, I lost 2 concrete workers, pouring foundations, doing stuff. And so Sam hopped on that. He starts tomorrow morning. This all happened today. So tomorrow morning, $20 an hour for a 20-year-old. That's not so bad. And under the table, Uncle Sam hopefully isn't listening. I didn't give you my son's last name, so Uncle Sam, you don't know. So there it is. Hey, Durwood, good to see you. Iowa Joe, good to have you in the show tonight. And let me do this. Speaking of in the show, I'm going to copy the link and paste it over here. Link to join the show. If you want to call in, I can't guarantee I'll pick you up. It all depends on the flow I'm in. But here's the link, guys. Right there. I just pasted it into the chat room. So if you want to call in, I'll see you lined up here. And if I don't get to you right away, don't worry. I will eventually. And if I don't get to you at all, don't blame me. It's just the way it works around here sometimes. So I've got it up in front of me. I hopefully will see it. Text me in all caps in the chat room if you think I've missed you sitting there. And I'm in a different window. So Michelle Canonfree says she's Team Rainey. Yeah, I started saying, if you saw my post today, folks, I lied to my wife. My son who's staying here. That's how I rabbit trailed on that. He needed to go to the store for something, and he didn't have any cash on him. And he said, can you loan me $40 till tomorrow? I said, sure. So I gave him the $40. It was actually like $36 for his purchase. And I said, sure, pay you back tomorrow. You can pay me back tomorrow. And this was last night. And so Rainey asks me late last night, she goes, so who bought Sam's stuff? I thought he didn't have any money. Probing question. And I said, I took care of it. I did it. I paid for it. Or no, I said he paid for it. I originally said he paid for it. I said, it's taken care of. He paid for it. My thinking is, I'm not going to open the can of worms of, oh, my wife is going to, now you don't need to be giving him any more money. You've spent so much supporting him down in the other, blah, 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 blah. And I just wanted to avoid the conflict. And so I said, he took care of it. I said, and my thinking, and this didn't come out of a joint account or my wife's account. This came out of my PayPal account on my PayPal Visa card. And so I said, he paid for it, which if you want to look at it in legal contractual terms, he took a verbal contract with me to pay. So in essence, the debt was his. So he paid for it with money I gave him. Well, that didn't fly today. My wife was looking at my PayPal account because I had it open. I was looking for something. And she goes, what's that $36 there? And you all know what happens from there. You lied to me. And it's not like, oh, you lied to me. It's like, oh, you lied to me about that, didn't you? And I said, yeah, but no. I said, in a contract with Sam. He's paid me back today. And that's where, the shit kind of hit the fan a little bit. And how can I trust you? And I said, you're certainly not serious. I said, I hope The last 16 years gives you a lot more to trust in me than a $40 issue with my son. So that's what the issue was. And so I made a big confession on Facebook today. I lied to my wife. Yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. There it is. So liar, liar, pants on fire, says Matthew Sainsbury. Hey, thanks. So there you go. Hey, let me tip a little Captain Kirk to you. Hey, there, see? There's my Kirk glass. There it is, full of ice cold tonic water, cranberry lime. So there you go. Thank you, Doug Stack. Scotty Roberts for president, he said. Did I say hi to you earlier? I think I saw you. So, hey, speaking of for president, I want to hit one topic of current events before we get into tonight's topic for the show. Did you know, this is news, actually, this is news. Do you know the Supreme Court unanimously sided against the Biden administration, further protecting the Fourth Amendment rights that we possess as citizens of this country? Now, do you know what your Fourth Amendment rights are? It's in part, it is the protection, the guaranteed right against unreasonable search and seizure. And the United States Supreme Court unanimously ruled yesterday that a so-called exception to the Fourth Amendment called community caretaking, that's what the Biden administration called it, does not, repeat, not permit police officers to enter and search your home without first obtaining a search warrant, even if doing so may be in the public's best interest. So the Supreme Court heard the case, Caniglia versus Strom. And upon appeal by Edward Caniglia, a Rhode Island man whose house was searched by warrantless police officers in 2015. During that search, police seized 2 firearms, which Caniglia recovered only after jumping through numerous bureaucratic hoops. Now, Caniglia later sued law enforcement, arguing their actions violated his Fourth Amendment right against a warrantless search and seizure. However, police claim that they acted lawfully under the community caretaking exception from the Biden administration. That's where they're getting this, even though this happened before Biden was in office. And this originated from Katie versus Dombrowski in a 1973 Supreme Court case that said police officers can conduct certain community caretaking functions if done in a reasonable, quote unquote, reasonable manner. And in that case, police officers had seized a gun that was located in an impounded car without a warrant. Now, the ruling overturned rulings by the Federal District Court and the First Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, what did the High Court actually say here? This is important. Hey, Gaza, good to see you. Nice to have you in here tonight. Going through a little news in our country here tonight. In a 9-0 ruling, it was unanimous. The Supreme Court yesterday ruled the community caretaking exception does not apply to private residences. What is reasonable for vehicles is different from what is reasonable for homes. Katie acknowledged as much, and this court has repeatedly declined to expand the scope of exceptions to the warrant requirement to permit warrantless entry into the home. That was Justice Clarence Thomas. He wrote that in the majority opinion. And in fact, Thomas specifically rebuked the First Circuit Court of Appeals for extending the exception. Now, the First Circuit's community caretaking rule, Thomas said, goes beyond anything this court has recognized. The decision below assumed that respondents lacked a warrant or consent, and it expressly disclaimed the possibility that they were reacting to a crime. And the court also declined to consider whether any recognized exigent circumstances were present because respondents had fortified the point. nor did it find that respondents' actions were akin to what a private citizen might have had authority to do if petitioner's wife had approached a neighbor for assistance instead of the police. Neither the holding nor logic of Katie justified that approach. True, Katie also involved a warrantless search for a firearm, but the location of that search was an impounded vehicle, not a home. A constitutional difference that the opinion repeatedly stressed. In fact, Katie expressly contrasted its treatment of a vehicle under the police control with a search of a car parked adjacent to the dwelling place of the owner. End quote. That was all Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice. But this recognition that police officers perform many civic tasks in modern society was just that, a recognition that these tasks exist and not an open-ended license to perform them anywhere, Thomas added to his decision. So anything else? So in rejecting the extension of the community caretaking exception to the Fourth Amendment, the Supreme Court rejected an argument from the Biden administration, which had urged the court to uphold as legal the violation of Coniglia's constitutional rights. An amicus brief filed by the Justice Department lawyers said, this is what they said, the touchstone of the Fourth Amendment is reasonableness. For criminal investigations, this court has generally incorporated the warrant clause into the Fourth Amendment's overreaching reasonableness requirements, but it has not generally done so for searches or seizures objectively premised on justifications other than the investigation of the wrongdoing. So the ultimate question in this case is therefore not whether the respondent officer's actions fit within some narrow warrant exception, but instead whether those actions were reasonable. And under all of the circumstances here, they were. That was the argument. Now, the brief further argued that warrants should not be presumptively required when a government official's action is objectively grounded in a non-investigatory public interest, such as health or safety. And so the Justice Department, in fact, was so keen on the Supreme Court not ruling in Coniglia's favor that they urged the court to uphold the officer's actions by concluding that the officers are entitled to qualified immunity if they rejected the Fourth Amendment argument. So that's what happened yesterday. And thank God the Supreme Court upheld the Constitution. We have a right. What happens if you start chiseling away at the right of unreasonable searches and seizures without a warrant in somebody's home? This was all being invoked. Now, I want to bring this up. This is why this is important, and this is why Biden is invoked here. Biden wanted the Supreme Court of the United States to let cops seize guns without a warrant from somebody's home. The Fourth Amendment protects Americans against unreasonable searches and seizures. And President Joe Biden's administration, troublingly, believes warrantless seizures of your firearms is perfectly reasonable, even if the reason to believe you pose a danger is to pose a danger to yourself or others and is practically non-existent. So in the Biden administration's first amicus brief to the Supreme Court, it urged the high court to uphold its lower court's ruling in Coniglia versus Strom. So the Biden administration got involved in this. Why? Because they want to impose their gun control rules, which violate the Second Amendment of the Constitution. And the Constitution doesn't give anybody rights. The Constitution protects and guarantees those rights that already exist. One of them being in the Second Amendment, the right to own and bear arms. And so the lower court found the actions were protected under an exception to the warrant requirement in the Fourth Amendment. Now, the Supreme Court heard these oral arguments in the case on Wednesday, according to Forbes. And according to an earlier Forbes report, the administration's brief argued that warrants aren't presumptively required when a government's official action is objectively grounded in non-investigatory public interests, such as health or safety. So, moreover, the Department of Justice brief stated that the qualified immunity, the doctrine that government officials cannot be held accountable for rights violations unless they violated clearly established constitutional or legal rights, should protect the Cranston, Rhode Island police officers who seized the guns. So you might remember last summer, congressional Democrats fought bitterly to end qualified immunity for police, arguing that it shielded law enforcement officers and agencies from liability. And apparently, though, it's now okay with the Biden administration, if only for a case that involves seizing weapons. So the case dates back to 2015. We went through some of that already. So this goes on. I want to get to the point here. So the exception. Critically, when police seized the guns, they didn't claim it was an emergency or to prevent imminent danger. Instead, the officers argued that their actions were a form of community caretaking, a narrow exception to the Fourth Amendment's warrant requirement. So that exception was first enumerated in 1973. We talked about that case. It was a Wisconsin case where law enforcement responded to a drunken driving accident involving a man who identified himself as a Chicago police officer. And they believed the suspect to have a police service revolver. And this goes on, the elements of that case. And this goes on for quite a bit. So here you have it. The Biden administration, on that basis alone, under the auspices of community caretaking, they took guns away. And the Biden administration believes this is reasonable. And as a backup, they argue the court could affirm the Court of Appeals judgment by concluding that the officers were entitled to qualified immunity. Now, the administration's brief was filed on February 18th of this year, the Biden administration. And just over 2 weeks after the administration filed this brief, the same administration cheered on White House House Democrats to introduce and pass a police reform bill that would eliminate qualified immunity for police officers. See the contradiction there? Left hand's not knowing what the right hand's doing in this administration. So during Wednesday's arguments, justices appeared mixed on the Caniglia case, but they shouldn't be. And as the Biden administration's evident hypocrisy on the qualified immunity issue shows, liberals in this country aren't interested in the legal principles at hand, so much as they're intent on using the legal system in whatever way necessary to authorize the government to seize American weapons in violation to the Constitution. So the Caniglia case then is, and remember, what is the purpose of the Supreme Court? To uphold the Constitution of the United States. Not to interpret the Constitution, to uphold it. So the Caniglia case then is nothing more than a blatant hypocritical attack on due process that beseeches the court to expand the community caretaking exception to the point where it becomes a de facto invitation to form in the form of a warrantless red flag gun seizure. Remember the red flag issue? Well, there's a red flag there. We can go in without a warrant. No, you can't. And it's an assault on the Second Amendment by gutting the Fourth Amendment. They could look at any of you. They could look at me. Say, we have reason to believe those guns could be used to harm somebody. So for community caretaking, we can barge into your house without a warrant and take away your guns. Now, Biden, this is opinion. Biden isn't just going after Americans' guns via legislation. He wouldn't mind if the Supreme Court helped authorities take them away. That's why yesterday's ruling was supremely, no pun intended, important. And I needed to get that out. I needed to talk about that. Yeah, it took 20 minutes of our time, but that's okay because I think this is very important. So, okay, I'm looking at some of the chat over there. I'm missing some things. Gaza Doug Stack says, I'm sick of housework. I've been throwing many things lately that we've hoarded for far too long. You know, we're doing that right now ourselves. Hey, Audrey, just saw you coming to the chat room. Sean Bowden, good to see you, brother. Siani Reese, good to see you as well. Glad you're here. Corey Blake, boom. Glad you're here, brother. And I never knew there were people out there that found ways to sneak people's guns away from each other. That's there. On a governmental level, that on the presidential administration level, that's seriously unwarranted would be a great pun. No, it's seriously bad news. So you got to watch what's going on around us. And I didn't even hear about this in the news until I read an article. Well, I read it in the news. Haven't heard it anywhere. So, family, another drop here. Can't stay connected. Uh-oh. Sorry to hear that, Teresa. So, let's see. We got anything else going on in there? I need a bath time, Scotty, says Siani. For me or for you? Yeah, you'll have to take us into the bathroom with you. Get those bubbles going, Siani, and keep us tuned in. All right, let's get into the topic for tonight. This is going to be not much of a segue here. We're just going to shift. We're going to talk about Enoch, and I titled tonight kind of Enoch's, the weirdness of Enoch. And as I've said it many times, and even earlier tonight, reading the book of Enoch is kind of like looking at the Old Testament on crack. There is some wild shit in the book of Enoch. And by the way, Corey Blake says, I had my shotgun for 15 years. Never had one incident. And then one night my family shows up with the cops, committed to having my gun taken away, eventually agreed to see a doctor so the cops could leave. Boom. Macabre says, movie last August, the hottest month in Osaka. After 20 years in the same place was a bitch. Moving. Yeah. I hate moving. So, more than half the counties in the U.S. are Second Amendment sanctuary cities now. That's fantastic. That's the way it needs to be. All right. Enoch's vision of the next world is what I wanted to talk about. And this really segues out of our talk of Cain, the son of Adam and Eve, who murdered his brother Abel and took off for the land of Nod and married a woman out there. Where'd she come from? So Cain and the other people. And then he builds a city. And that city still exists today. He named the city Uruk, or Enoch, after his son. Linguistically, that translates into Uruk, which is the basis of the city of Uruk that exists today in Iraq. And it means first beautiful city. And so we were looking at that last week. And we've worked our way up through the whole Nephilim issue, the Watchers issue, and now it's going to take us to Enoch's vision of the next world. And I wanted to get into this mostly because, as you know, for my publisher, I'm working on a book on the Book of Enoch, and I'm trying to finish my fictional novel first, the one for my agent, The 10 Breaths of Ra, which takes place in 1920s Egypt. It's more an occult mystery, an occult detective story. But I'm starting to gather information on the Book of Enoch. And the question has to be asked, what's the appeal of the curious collection of tales known as the Book of Enoch? It was and is that it provides a glimpse into the beyond. This is what Enoch tells us. And as George Nicholsberg suggested in his new commentary on the Book of Enoch, Enoch reassures the faithful that there was and will be another reality far better than their present painful circumstances. The books of Enoch, it's the seltzer water, Nicholsberg wrote. I'm waiting for a big belch to come up, guys, and I'm trying to not do that on air. So the books of Enoch guarantee future salvation on the basis of a present reality. Deliverance will take place soon, is what the Book of Enoch tells you. Susie Q says, okay, I just popped to another channel, another live channel. It's doing the same thing. What is this topic on Enoch? You know, I have some people I've been closely associated with before. When I would do topics on this show, they'd suddenly pop up on somebody else's show. So, could leave it alone. So, unless you're talking about technical issues, and that happens to everybody. So, the publication of the first volume of Nickelberg's commentary on First Enoch is a major event in the study, not only of this strange and mysterious text of Enoch, but also of earlier Judaism and early Christianity. And while Nickelberg, who wrote this commentary, is now retired from teaching at the University of Iowa, he's widely recognized as a world authority on the literature of early Judaism. And his commentary, which will eventually consist of 2 volumes, is one of the few, very few, full-scale commentaries ever published on the pseudepigraphic work of Enoch, the pseudepigrapha. And that is an extra-biblical work that's falsely attributed to a biblical character, the pseudepigrapha. And in this case, Enoch. Was a guy, did he sit down and write all these books that are encased in the book of Enoch? The books of Enoch? So modern scholars who study the periods of early Judaism and Christianity have found it really helpful to use the pseudepigrapha to set scriptural writings into a wider, a broader framework of Jewish and Christian thought in which they belong. And they exemplify developments in many areas, such as beliefs about the end times that are important to know in studying the Bible. And the pseudepigraphic book of Enoch is attributed to the sole author, Enoch, but it's actually the work of several different writers. And there are 5 major sections. Each is dated to a different time period, plus a concluding chapter. And I'm going to go through what those books are. But it's rather like reading about the prophet Samuel in the books of Samuel. Well, Samuel dies in the book of Samuel, so somebody else wrote that. Same with the book of Enoch. So now the books of Enoch are divided into these books. Number 1, the book of the Watchers, who we've mentioned. The Bene Ha-Elohim, the Watchers, the sons of God. That's chapters 1 through 36, which includes Enoch's vision of heaven, an account of the fall of the angels, based on Genesis 6, 1 through 4, in which, now, I disagree with this point that the commentators have, but they call the Watchers angels. The angels are never referred to as Watchers. The Watchers never referred to as angels. Referred to as Elohim, the Bene Ha-Elohim, the sons of the Elohim. But this is where the sons of God have intercourse with the beautiful women of earth and give birth to the Nephilim. Enoch attempts to intercede with God on behalf of the Watchers. He's then given 2 tours of the universe by the angels when he's taken up into heavens. And the text may date as early as the 3rd century BCE. Several Aramaic copies of parts of the Book of the Watchers have been identified among the Dead Sea Scrolls from the Qumran cave. And the earliest fragmentary manuscript dates, according to the editor Joseph Milik, to between 200 and 150 BCE. And that's the Book of the Watchers. Then you have the Book of the Parables, or the similitudes of Enoch. This is chapters 37 through 71. Now, this book includes frequent references to a person called the Righteous One, or the Chosen One, or the Messiah, the Anointed One, the Son of Man, an end-time judge who reverses the fortunes of the oppressed and condemns their oppressors. And in the very last chapter of Enoch is told that he is that Son of Man, Enoch himself. So as it's been noted by some of these commentators in the previous article on the issue, comparisons have been made between the sons of man and Jesus' portrayal of himself as Son of Man in the Gospels. So the Book of Parables by Enoch may have been composed in the late 1st century BCE, although a number of scholars prefer to place it in the 1st or even the 2nd century CE, or the Common Era. And so, by the way, I got to just take a look and see if anybody's over there in our chat. Nope. Not the chat, the waiting to come online. So that's good. I'm going to keep going. Third book of Enoch is the astronomical book, chapters 72 through 82, which contains a revelation to Enoch from his heavenly guide, the angel Uriel. And Uriel explains the structure of the universe by describing the course of the sun in a 364-day year, and of the moon in a 354-day year. Now, the same 2 solar and lunar years with the same number of days are combined and correlated in several of the calendrical documents found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so, according to the astronomical book, the sun and moon pass through the gates at the eastern and western sides of the heavens. The book also discusses the movement of the stars and the winds and other elements of the created order, all of which is ultimately under divine control. And so the astronomical book, like the Book of the Watchers, may date from the 3rd century BCE. It's the oldest extant copy that seems to have been made not long after 200 BCE. And so sizable portions of the text are preserved on 4 copies written in Aramaic from the Qumran cave number 4. And all this says is that people say, the Bible, we don't have the source material. And we do. We go way back with some of these texts. You're talking 300 years before the time of Christ, some of these texts. Number 4 is the Book of Dreams. This is chapter 83 through 90. It consists of 2 dream visions that were given to Enoch. The first tells of the coming flood. The second, known as the animal apocalypse, presents biblical history from Adam and Eve to Maccabean times, which is before the time of Christ. And the second is it's with animals in place of the biblical characters. It's anthropomorphized, like Tam O'Hare. And so Israel is a flock of sheep, and God is the Lord of the sheep. And historical allusions at the end of the apocalypse to Judah Maccabee and his times suggest that it was written in the late 160s BCE, the time of the Maccabean revolt. And the Book of Dreams is also represented on Aramaic copies from the Qumran caves. Corey Blake says it's a translation. That's right. Damn it, Jim! I'm a mechanist. I'm a mechanist. A machinist, not a magician. There you go, Matt Finn. And that's like a little meme I saw with Kirk looking at McCoy, and he says, "When do you think this COVID epidemic thing is going to end?" And McCoy says, "Damn it, Jim! I'm a doctor, not a politician." So there you go. According to the radar, Scotty has a lot of thunderstorms up there. I do, Steve Clark. Welcome to the show, Steve, by the way. Good to see you. And Roger Rabbit, that you're back in here. Good to see you too. Amanda B. in Australia. Just like Gaza down there in Australia. Or is Gaza in New Zealand? I keep forgetting that little point. I know it's huge down there. From over here, though, it's like this big on the map. So it's like you're right next to Australia. So there you go. So the 5th book is the Epistle of Enoch. And it's chapters 91 through 107. It offers ethical instructions for the righteous and the wicked. It also includes a story about the birth of the extraordinary precocious Noah and an apocalypse called the Apocalypse of Weeks that divides all of biblical history and beyond into even uneven units of time called weeks. The author lives in the 7th week, it says, and the final judgment will begin in the 8th week. And so the Epistle of Enoch may date as early as 170 BCE, though it's usually dated later in the same century. And so the conclusion is chapter 108. This single chapter doesn't appear in any of the early copies of Enoch. It was probably added later to wrap up the collection. So, as the reader of the work soon recognizes, one important theme of the first book of Enoch is how the origins of massive amounts of evil came into this world. The Book of the Watchers serves to explain how the world became so evil that God sent the flood. This was an important question to biblical expositors in ancient times, who questioned whether God's dramatic action of the flood, as recorded in Genesis, was actually justified or not. So in Genesis 6, what did God tell Noah? He said, I've decided to put an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with lawlessness. Then the earth, according to the biblical narrator, was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its ways upon the earth. That's in Genesis 6:11 and 12. And every inclination of the thoughts of humankind's hearts was nothing but evil all the time, according to Genesis 6:5. I don't know what's going on with the buffering, guys. I know YouTube was having problems earlier today. We couldn't even post the show up earlier today, meaning posting the live link to the show for now. So they sent out an apology email this evening. So anyway, God's harsh assessment of humankind posed a problem for ancient interpreters. This whole idea that God would wipe out all of humanity because humanity had turned lawless and evil and wickedness. And so this posed a problem for the ancient interpreters of the Old Testament, who scoured the earlier chapters of Genesis looking for references to mankind's evil. And they knew that Adam and Eve had sinned by eating the forbidden fruit. That's the theology. That Cain had killed Abel, and that Noah's father Lamech had killed someone. He confesses to it in Genesis 4:23. But was this enough to justify the flood that eliminated every person and animal except those on the ark? And how had evil grown so rapidly and monstrously since the days of Adam that God could regret ever having made humankind? So, seeking to answer these questions, the authors of Enoch and other ancient expositors turn to the cryptic passages that immediately precedes the flood account. We talked about this the other day. We read this. Genesis 6:1-4. When men began to increase on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, the watchers, saw how beautiful the daughters of men were, and took wives from among those that pleased them. The Lord said, My breath shall not abide in man forever, since he too is flesh. Let the days allowed him be 120 years. It was then and later then too that the Nephilim appeared on the earth, when the divine beings cohabited with the daughters of men who bore them offspring. They were the heroes of old and the men of renown. Now, the book of Watchers, Enoch's book, elaborates greatly on this passage. Here is in other ancient texts, the sons of God are understood to be perhaps angelic. The Nephilim are identified as giants. Nephilim is translated giants in the Septuagint as well, although the Bible tells us very little about the Nephilim. And so in extra-biblical literature, these giant warriors wreak havoc. In the book of Watchers, they devour all the food on the earth, and they terrify the population. It says in 1 Enoch 7:3-6, these giants devoured all the toil of men until men were unable to sustain them, and the giants turned against them in order to devour them and to devour men. And they began to sin against birds and against animals and against reptiles and against fish, and they devoured one another's flesh, and they drank the blood from it. Then the earth complained about the lawless ones. That's 1 Enoch 7:3-6. So they bring such evil, these watchers, the offspring, the Nephilim, they bring such evil to earth that God has no choice but to send the flood, according to Enoch. And it's a bizarre story, but in one form or another, it's widely attested in Jewish sources. It's mentioned, for example, in the pseudepigraphic Book of Jubilees, several of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the writings of the first century historian Josephus, and 2nd Enoch, and Christian texts in the New Testament, such as the book of 2nd Peter, the book of Jude, and the writings of several 2nd to 3rd century Christians, such as Tertullian. The book of Watchers provided powerful sermonic material, a memorable example of evil and divine punishment. And the prudent should beware. This is what they taught. Now, what's interesting, though, is that this angelic connection that was made, just like Nephilim was interpreted giants, the Watchers were interpreted to be angels. Yet the word angel never appears in the text. And I brought this up before, the word malach for angel, or malachim, the plural for angel. Just like Nephilim, the plural suffix put on the end. But Elohim appears in the text. So, another remarkable feature of First Enoch is that the law revealed to Moses on Mount Sinai plays almost no part at all in his books. And this is surprising when one considers how important judgment is in First Enoch, and how often the writers speak of being righteous and doing what is upright. But instead of citing Mosaic law, the book of Enoch presents an alternative revelation. Now, this is strong stuff textually and theologically. So, of course, Enoch lived before the flood. And remember, Enoch is that guy that's mentioned in the genealogies. And Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him. Now, of course, Enoch lived before the flood, and therefore long before the Mosaic law was revealed, before it was even given to Moses by God on Mount Sinai. But this does not explain the absence of references to Mosaic law. Remember, First Enoch includes two apocalypses, the apocalypse of weeks and the animal apocalypse. They recount the entire history of Israel, beginning with the creation. Both apocalypses cover the wilderness period in which Moses should receive the law. But they gloss over the event of the receiving of the tablets of the law. And so the apocalypse of weeks reaches the moment when the law should be given in its fourth week. And after this, in the fourth week, at its end, visions of the holy and righteous will be seen, and a law for all generations, and an enclosure will be made for them. That's 1 Enoch 93:6. Now, indeed, the law is mentioned here, but it's not given to Moses. He's not even mentioned. Further, nothing is added to suggest the law's importance or its character of content. It's in no way distinguished from references to other laws mentioned in 1 Enoch, such as the Noahic laws, for example, banning murder, which all nations were expected to obey. And so Moses loved the burning bush too much, damn you, acacia. I don't think it was an acacia. There was something else that it was. And I got a little snippet in one of my leather-bound journals, a little snippet of that plant from Egypt. Anyway, let's move on. The law of Moses recedes even further from view in the animal apocalypse of Enoch. This historical survey reaches the end of the Egyptian sojourn in 1 Enoch 89:27 with the drowning of the Egyptians, and it's pictured as wolves. Remember I said this was an anthropomorphized book, telling it like Tam O'Hare with animals. The drowning of the wolves in the sea. This was meant to be the Egyptians, the armies of Pharaoh. And the Sinai experience follows, and that sheep, Moses, went up to the summit of a high rock, and the Lord of the sheep, God, has sent it to them. And after this I saw the Lord of the sheep standing before them, and his appearance was terrible and majestic. And all those sheep saw him and were afraid of him. And all of them were afraid and trembled before him. And they cried out after that sheep with them, which was in their midst. We cannot stand before our Lord, nor look at him. And that sheep which led them again went up to the summit of that rock. And the sheep began to be blinded and to go astray from the path which it had shown to them. But that sheep did not know. And that's 1 Enoch 89:29 through 32. So hold on. Flynn! What are you doing?
I'm closing the door
Why?
because I wanted to.
Are you going back to bed?
Yeah.
Good night. All right. Sorry for that familial break there, folks. That's the commercial break for tonight. So, Doug Stack says, go back to the makeshift studio. Why? I don't like the makeshift studio. So, Teresa's back. Good to see you. And so Moses, the sheep, goes up in the mountain, but he doesn't receive any law, according to the book of Enoch, the anthropomorphized book of Epistle of the Animals, apocryphal, apocalypse of the animals. He doesn't receive the law. And there's only one hint of Moses' law in the description of the straying sheep. They departed from the path of Moses that he had shown them, which suggests that Israel had departed from some kind of rules or regulations for them. But that's all it says. It's hinted at, not talked about. So even later, when Israel worships the golden calf and sins in the land, this isn't seen as a violation of the covenantal law, as it's in the Bible. Also in Jerusalem, and the temple are destroyed, and the people exiled. The law is never mentioned. In the Bible, the prophets regularly relate exile to violations of the covenantal laws. The book of Enoch offers an alternative to the forms of Judaism that center upon the covenantal law God gave to Moses. Enoch appeals to a myth of great evil and punishment in ancient times and calls on people to be righteous now because another judgment is coming. That righteousness is defined by Enoch's writings, not the Mosaic law. Now, perhaps Enoch, who lived before the nations were formed, was chosen as a pseudepigraphic hero to make a wider appeal than Moses, who lived after the separation into nations and after Israel charted its separate course. We don't know for sure. We can only speculate that. And these are just a couple of the themes that are discussed in the detail in the commentaries that were written 100 years ago. They shed light on the multifaceted nature of Judaism during that particular period, which we miss by reading just the Bible. And it reminds us why this fresh translation and commentary are so important. And the present volume that's being written now offers the student of early Enoch literature a complete collection and analysis of all the varied textual material. It's all carefully scrutinized. It's a rich exegetical treatment of the reconstructed text of Enoch. And it's a critical interaction with a whole host, a wide variety of scholarly literature about Enoch and First Enoch. And until now, Matthew Black's 1985 translation and commentary of Enoch was the fullest study of First Enoch. And Nicholsburg now, his new edition, benefits greatly from the recent publication of many Enoch manuscripts from Qumran and from the growing secondary literature on the book, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Fresh information. Hey, Morgan Snow. I see you're in there somewhere. So good to see you. So, let's see. Who said something about refreshing? Sheesh, I didn't expect this tonight, says Matthew Sainsbury. That's cool, Matthew. Surprise! So, I just refreshed everybody there, Scotty, again. And so refresh, Morgan. So I have a good video and audio feed with few buffering issues, says Matt, but nothing like some people. Buffering here in Kansas, says Steve. Where's everybody that's buffering at? Oops. Now says retry, no connection. Sorry about that, Steve. Don't know what's going on. It could be a YouTube thing. It could be an internet thing in various places all around. So Michelle Cannon Free is buffering too. I don't know, guys. I should look at it here. Hold on. Let me just look at the podcast, not my monitor. Let me look at my channel and let me call this up. Boom. Let's just see if it picks up for me. Da-na-na-na-na-na. There I am. The podcast, not my monitor. Oh, I'm buffering. Let me look at my channel. Wow. I don't know what that is. Call this up. Boom. Let's just see. Yeah, it's buffering on my end too. So hopefully we can get through this show tonight. We got 5 minutes technically left of the show and a lot of material. You know what I want to cover tomorrow night, by the way? Did Eve fall or was she pushed? We're going to talk about that tomorrow night. We may have to, well, we've only got a few minutes left on the material I have here. But as is the custom in Hermenia, these commentary series of which it's a part, Nicholsburg's volume contains a lengthy 125-page, well footnoted introduction covering an introduction that's 125 pages long, covering the manuscripts that attest to the different versions of First Enoch, the literary history of the work, the major themes in it, the influences of Enoch on later literature, both Jewish and Christian, and it trends in modern scholarship. And each section of First Enoch has its own introduction, discussing literary form, audience, setting, function. And then there's the translation that was done by this author, Nicholsburg. It's copiously noted with reference to variant readings and explanations of numerous technical problems, textual problems. I want to get this book myself, by the way. An index of references to ancient texts and a list of names of modern scholars to whose work he subscribes. And so the theory on how the Book of Enoch took shape is based on the manuscript evidence from Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls, where at least some of these books were gathered together in single manuscripts. And Yosef Milik, who identified the first and first published many of the Qumran fragments from Enoch, from the Qumran cave, thought the copy that we have contained parts of chapter 1, 6, 10, and he lists all these chapters. And from the Book of Dreams, also from the Epistle of Enoch. And he also thought the Book of the Giants was copied on this manuscript. So hence by the year 30 to the year 1 BCE, the date of the handwriting, these books were gathered on a single manuscript. And so it's very cool. We also have reason to believe that the astronomical book, although it may be the most ancient Enoch book of them all, at first wasn't copied on the same scroll with the other Enoch booklets. It was so long in its Aramaic form that it alone would have occupied a full scroll. So no parts of it are attested on any Qumran manuscript that contains text from another Enoch book. And so blah, 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 on that goes. It's the scholarly junk behind it. So, of course, when one writes so large a book on a complicated ancient text like Enoch, about which scholars have expressed all sorts of varied opinions, there are bound to be areas of disagreement. And I consider such points regarding this volume to be relatively minor. And the major statement to be made here is that Nicholsburg's text has produced an essential reference work. And so he could hardly have known when he began studying Enoch as a graduate student in Harvard in the 1960s that the literature on First Enoch would mushroom to such an extent in light of the Qumran manuscripts and of the renewed scholarly interest in the period of early Judaism. So remember when I say when you look at ancient text, you have to first translate it in its context, what it would have meant at the time it was written. Then you have to translate it looking at the language. What language was used? What linguistic tools were used? Then you have to look at it and say, what would the audience of the book taken in context from what was written? So those things all have to be looked at. So, yeah, I hope tomorrow will be better too. If people are having, sorry, if you're having some connection problems, I apologize for that. I don't know what the problem is. We seem to be streaming okay from this end, so I'm not sure what that is. Hold on. I'm going to try one thing. I may lose y'all, and if I do, well, you know what? We'll try something different. Hang on. Where is my I don't even see my connection here. Hold on. I got to call it up here. I'm wondering if I'm hardwired or if I'm going wireless here. Let's find out. My network. Let's see. We're connected using Ethernet. We're hardwired tonight, not wireless. So I'm hardwired right to the internet. So it shouldn't be coming from my connection. So I'm sorry that's going on. I do know that they were having some problems on YouTube today. So tomorrow, let's hope we have a little better connection for most of you. Don't know what's going on. Steve says, keep hearing for those who can hear and see you. Thank you. I appreciate that, Steve. But we're kind of wrapping it up, believe it or not. Got through my Enoch material. Tomorrow, I want to talk about, did Eve fall or was she pushed? And so, remember in the 1500s, how the witch hunting craze spread all through Europe? By the 1600s, it made it over here. Hundreds and thousands of women were accused of sorcery. They were tortured. And they were executed, burned at the stake. The witch craze, as it was known, was spurred by the publication of a guide to identification and elimination of witches. We've talked about this before. Maybe Rocky and I talked about this. This book, The Malleus Maleficarium. The Malleus Maleficarum. It's the hammer against the witches, is what that means. And it was written for the Roman Catholic Church, and this influential manual traced the roots of witchery all the way back to the first woman. It says, for though the devil tempted Eve to sin, yet Eve seduced Adam. And as the sin of Eve would not have brought death to our soul and body, unless the sin had afterwards passed on to Adam, to which he was tempted by Eve, not the devil. Therefore, she is more bitter than death. Thank you to the writers of the Malleus Maleficarum. And tomorrow, we're going to talk about that. So, guys, I want to thank you for joining me here tonight. I appreciate your being here. I'm sorry there was buffering problems all over the place. This might be, the source might be YouTube itself, as they were having other great problems today. Hopefully, that will all be solved by tomorrow. Yep, Teresa, the same kind of Puritans that busted up the hieroglyphs of Egyptian temples. Exactly. And so, oh, damn, he says. Sarah's show just lost video and audio also. Well, I didn't know she was broadcasting at the same time. Huh. Oh, well. So there we go. Maybe too many of us broadcasting at the same time. So Tituba was sold to Samuel Paris. Yeah, that's correct, Matthew. That's in the Salem witch trials. So, guys, yeah, I hope they straighten it all up by tomorrow as well. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sign off. I want to thank you for being here, giving me your time. And, and by the way, go over to my Etsy page. We put up a new shirt. Nothing new. It's the Not Today Satan shirt. And so you can tell that to anybody you want. Not today, Satan. So when an evil, blood-sucking succubus tries to ruin your friends or your life, just tell them, not today, Satan. That's applicable to ex-spouses, evil bosses, and general dumbasses. So go pick that shirt up. It's over there now. That helps support this show, too. Thanks for being here. You know what? Live long and prosper.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.